listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11 Monday through Friday. It is the Martha Zoller Show, and we have a very, very special thing that we are doing today, which I am very excited about. We're going to be doing a DOGE Caucus town hall, a radio town hall, an End Waste, Fraud, and Abuse radio tour. Congressman Buddy Carter is joining me right now. And Congressman Carter, thank you so much for giving us this time today.
Well, thank you, Martha, for having me. I'm excited about this. I'm looking forward to it.
So tell us first about the DOGE Caucus.
Well, the DOGE Caucus, let's keep in mind DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. We all know this is something the president campaigned on. He said we're going to be more efficient. We're going to cut out waste, fraud, and abuse. And this is the way he's delivering it. Now, keep in mind, he had Vivek Ramaswamy at one point and Elon Musk. Now it's just Elon Musk and his people who are doing it. They are uncovering all of the things that we need to do. And when I say we, I mean Congress, because we have the ability to legislate and to codify these things. And that's what the DOGE Caucus is going to be doing. We're going to be taking what Elon Musk and DOGE uncover and send to us, and then we're going to act upon it. So that's what the DOGE Caucus is about.
Yeah, and I heard one of your colleagues discussing this yesterday and basically saying it's as simple as, getting the report from Elon Musk or from DOGE and then adding some language to it and then getting it through. I mean, this is not, once he identifies things, it will not be that difficult to get rid of them.
No, it's not rocket science. I mean, it's, we do legislation all the time, and it is basically straightforward, as you indicated, and that's our responsibility. But without codifying it, then, you really haven't achieved anything, because then it could happen again, and that's not what we want. We want this once and for all taken care of. And, I think it's important to note, Mark, that this is not the first time this has happened. If you'll remember back to the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton tried to do the same thing in many ways. He wanted to cut back on the bureaucracy, and he wanted to cut back on the number of employees that the federal government had. He made a concerted effort to do that. And Obama did the same thing, Barack Obama. So, this is, and it's not a partisan thing. That's what baffles me, is that I hear the Democrats say, all upset. Well, folks, we're saving taxpayers' money. And, the taxpayers' money is Democrats' money, it's Republicans' money, it's independents' money. And it's not one party's money, it's all of our money.
You can join us on the phones at 770-535-2911. We're talking to Congressman Buddy Carter. He's a member of the DOGE Caucus, and he's doing these radio appearances around the state. We're so happy that he started with us. But we've got a lot of things that are happening related to this. And, what I like seeing, quite frankly, Congressman Carter, is that we've got these numbers of recommendations being made. And I'm not as big on the personnel ones. Those need to be done, but those need to be done by cabinet secretaries. If I were in charge of DOGE, what I would have done is just zeroed out all the open jobs that there were, and then said to the departments, reorganize based on what you've got and get rid of who you need to get rid of. But that's not for me to say one way or another. The big thing that I love about what I'm seeing every day as I follow what DOGE is doing is things like contracts where you have 11,000 employees, but you have 25,000 contracts for a particular department, or people that are still on the Social Security rolls that are in their hundreds, which is not true. Fixing and updating and making systems more efficient, that's really where I think we're going to get the big savings.
It really is, and keep in mind, we're now using 21st century technology to check on these things. We should have been doing that long ago, but finally, and, say what you will about Elon Musk, he is using 21st century technology to uncover these things. And certainly with the Social Security, it's just unbelievable. You know, people between 100 and 136 who are still getting Social Security, and you know, either they should be in the Book of World Records or there's something wrong. Well, we know there's something wrong. I think I read somewhere where they found one that was 326 years old. You know, evidently the husband was part of the Boston Tea Party, and.
You know, what I think is interesting is, and how I heard Elon Musk explain this, it's not that he really believes there are people in their hundreds getting checks. Because I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, buddy, I had 2 members of my family pass away last year that were receiving Social Security benefits. And literally by the end of the week, or 2 weeks, I got some contact from Social Security, and they had either clawed back some of the money that they had paid out that month, or the check stayed in one case because the person died far enough into the month. So they are pretty good at those kinds of things. But what he explained, it's not that necessarily checks are going out to these people, is that if you have their name, you can verify that they're on the Social Security rolls, and that opens up a whole bunch of other benefits that a fraudulent person could apply for.
That's exactly right. It's very important to note because, you know, of government efficiency. Yes, we're trying to uncover waste, fraud, and abuse, but we're trying to make the system more efficient. And that's what he's pointing out, is that, someone might be getting a check, but then it may not be necessarily that part. They may not really be getting a check, but we need to get this more efficient, and we need to get it more streamlined. And I hope and I feel like that's what they're going to be doing.
So what are you getting the most questions about, or maybe a better question is, what has caught your eye?
Well, obviously the Social Security is pretty interesting. Some of the funds going overseas, I think, you know, that's really an interesting thing to me. I don't know if we may have spoken about this before, about what I discovered during the debate about Ukraine funding, and that there was a generational divide, if you will, and that older people who understood the importance of making sure that Putin wasn't successful, that they were just adamant about, we got to send that money, we got to help them. Whereas younger people were saying, wait a minute, why are we sending all this money overseas? Well, when he's uncovering all these different, the sending money over to the Taliban for oral contraceptives and condoms,
yeah.
What are we doing here? Millions of dollars going over there for that? That really struck me as being something that, there's so much. We have such a bloated bureaucracy that we miss that a lot of times. And when they uncover it, I think it really is eyebrow raising.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Buddy Carter's here with me today. He's the congressman from the 1st Congressional District, and he's in the DOGE Caucus. And we're talking about DOGE today. And you can join us on the phones, as well as send us a text message at 770-535-2911. So, Buddy, we have a question from someone that says, do we really need 435 representatives? Years and years ago, maybe. But with the communications channels today, maybe we don't need that many.
Well, there are times when I would agree with that. I will tell you that. But, representative government is important, and I still maintain that we have the best government in the world, and our forefathers were just brilliant. And as time goes on, I'm more and more convinced of that. Yes, 435 is a lot of people, and it's tough, but, each of us represents approximately between 750 and 800,000 people, and that's a lot of people. So if you were to cut back on the number of representatives, and all of a sudden I'm trying to represent 1.5 million or 2 million, I'm not sure that's better government.
So an old friend of mine, Bob Andrews, who was a state senator back in the day, he passed away a number of years ago, but he used to say, well, Martha, in his great voice, he says, we have the worst government in the world except for everybody else. So, because it is messy. Democracy's messy. A republic is messy. Representative government is messy because of the nature of different things that people think. And I think what's got to happen, I'm looking at what DOGE here did yesterday. They put contract updates, but just for example, yesterday they terminated 44 contracts with a value of $5.2 billion, a savings of $640 million. So that means they were able to cut that much out of it. Went on to say, a lot of consulting contracts. And I think the thing that Elon Musk has and DOGE, and I'm sure the work you've done has uncovered, is this incestuous relationship where money might be allocated to a department and then they go out and get consultants and all this kind of stuff. Department of Education is a perfect example. Only about a tenth of the money actually goes to educating children, and all the rest is about administration. And I bet you're going to find something like that in every department.
Well, you will, and of course.
Congressman Carter? Yes, there you are. You're back.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And probably the best example of that thus far has been with the National Institute of Health and with the grants that they sent out where, a college or university may get a $100 million grant, and yet they also get, in addition to that, a certain amount for administrating that grant. And, we understand that some of it is needed, but it varied from 15% to 60%. Some of them were getting on top of that $100 million, another $60 million, just for administration. And, we understand that there are needs for that, but why does one group need 60% and another only needs 15%? And why isn't it consistent? And that's what we're trying, and that's what DOGE is trying to point out. And I think they're doing an excellent job with that and bringing it to our attention. And bringing it to our attention, let us address it.
So, and how is an NGO not a government? NGO stands for non-governmental organization, but all their money comes from the government. So how is it that that's not a governmental organization? Now, I know you remember a couple of weeks ago when this discovery of $2 billion given to an organization that Stacey Abrams was affiliated with. And that basically was an organization that had been stood up in the previous year, had never done anything, had about $100 in the bank when they got the $2 billion. And she's out trying to explain what it is that they do. But clearly, this is no disrespect to Stacey. Stacey's been through a lot, and, it looks like she's made another mistake as far as how she affiliates herself. But this is something she had no previous experience in. Other people didn't. And they get $2 billion to try to replace people's appliances. That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And that's what happened at the end of last calendar year. At the end of the Biden-Harris administration, the IRA had allocated so much money to go out, and they were just pushing it out the door as quickly as they could to make sure that it got out. And they didn't do a good job of double checking everything to make sure it was going. And this is a perfect example. The group that's linked to Stacey Abrams, where they have $100 and all of a sudden they get $2 billion. They've never had that much before, ever. And those, we had numerous examples of that. But the administration, again, was pushing the money out the door so quickly in order to get it out before the new administration came in and stopped that flow, that we're going to find a lot more of that happened. And we're trying to claw it back now. We're actually doing that in an Energy and Commerce Committee that has jurisdiction, because a lot of the IRA was environmental and was, for the Green New Deal. And some of these groups were just formed for no other reason but to get this money.
And that's the Inflation Reduction Act when you say IRA. And it wasn't about inflation. It wasn't about reducing anything. It was about spending more. And look, you've been in this job long enough, and I know people that work in the federal government, and as long as I've known them, they've said, yeah, we get in this hurry at the end of the fiscal year where we've got to spend everything we've got left because there's no benefit for saving money. I think that's another fix you could put into the system, that if you are a department and you actually spend less than what you're allocated, there ought to be some benefit for that.
That's exactly right. Some kind of incentive that if you save some money, that you'll be rewarded for it. I got to be quite honest with you, Martha, and I hate to admit this, but when I first got to Congress, I saw it in my own office. All of a sudden, at the end of the year, we started getting all this equipment. I said, why? Where are we getting all this equipment? Well, we got this money to spend. We got to spend it. Oh, no, we don't have to spend it. We can send it back. And, it doesn't have to be spent. Oh, well, we needed this. Did we really need this? Come on, guys.
Buddy, I appreciate you being with us. You're the congressman from the 1st District. I know you're going to be talking to folks around the state around this, around the DOGE Caucus. So tell us what you guys are working on right now. What are you trying to get to the bottom of?
Well, one of the things, Martha, that I'm working on personally is called the SWAP Act. And it's the Stop Wasteful Allocation of Money to Pelosi. Actually, in San Francisco, in Nancy Pelosi's district, there is a building that is underutilized, and it's very expensive. It was built in 2007, many years ago, at a cost of $144 million. And now it's underutilized. And, of course, a building that expensive has a lot of upkeep, and we're spending a lot of money to upkeep it, and it's not being utilized. This is an example of where, so many people are not coming into work now, and this building in particular doesn't have people occupying it. This is an example, and what the Swamp Act will do is to have it, is to sell it. And this is an example of what we're trying to do, to unload some of these assets that we have that are underutilized and that are costing us money. Another example, we kind of mentioned it earlier, was trying to claw back some of the funds from the IRA. Some of those funds that they've been trying to for, but they weren't successful in getting them out before the end of the year. We're going to claw those back. And we're also looking, and DOGE is helping us with this, we're also looking at some of the funds that did go out at the end of the year and who they went out to, and are these legitimate NGOs, as we talked about earlier. And if they're not, then, look, we need to get that money back, and we're going to be doing that.
So I don't know if you were in the Georgia State in the legislature when Sonny Perdue was governor, but he had to go through this process where he had to find out where all the cars were, find out where all the buildings were, find out where all the leases were. It sounds to me we're in kind of a similar place, but on a much bigger scale, where we've got cars. And, I saw some story about where there's hundreds of thousands of more credit cards that are actually than there are employees in the federal government. And so, Elon Musk and DOGE is canceling that. But is that the kinds of things we need to be doing? We need to know where the buildings are. We need to know what the leases are, who has cars, who doesn't. Because that's all assets that can either be used if they need to be used, or they can be sold if they need to be sold.
You've hit the nail on the head. And yes, I was in the Georgia State House when Sonny Perdue was governor, and that was an important part of what we were trying to do back then, to identify the assets that the state government had. You can only imagine multiplying that times 50 of what the federal government has. And we don't know what we have, to be quite honest with you. And that's what we're trying to figure out. What are our assets? And you got more cars than you do people? You got to be kidding me. How can this be? And that's the type of thing that using the 21st century technology that Elon Musk brings to the table, we can look at this a lot quicker and we can understand it a lot quicker. And I think that's one of the things that has got the other side so upset, is that, this president, as we know, President Trump, he's probably got more done in his first 2 months in office than Joe Biden got done in 4 years. And they're really upset about that.
Yeah, I tell you what, I was laughing with somebody yesterday, and I was talking to somebody in a restaurant I was in, and I said, yeah, it's like 10 years worth of news, every week. That's just kind of how fast things are going, and it's completely transparent. That's the other part of it. You know what Donald Trump is doing all day long, every day, late into the night. I mean, he is busy, busy, busy. I have never seen somebody that's as really energetic as he is. When you look at the comparison, there is not that much of a difference in age between the previous president and the current president. But the current president is, go, go, go all the time. And I think that that's important. And I heard today that the D.C., that the Supreme Court has said that they do not have to pay out this foreign aid that they've decided not to pay out. So that's good news. But I want to ask you a question about this. And it's not DOGE directly, but it is kind of the ancillary that the president is out there trying to keep his promises. But the, these individual district court judges are trying to throw monkey wrenches. And what's unusual about it, I think, is that they're putting a administrative state together. They're working to protect that, and they're resisting the president's authority, giving these blanket stops instead of just dealing with the district they're in. I think that's very concerning, even though I'm a huge supporter of the judiciary, and I know that ultimately when you go through the process that more times than not the right thing happens. But there's a little bit of movement right now that makes you nervous.
There is, and certainly if you look at some of these judges who are making these decisions, you see that they were appointed by a different administration, and you wonder if that has anything to do with it. I mean, we're not that naive. I was born at night, but it wasn't last night, so that is a concern. And let me preface my brief remarks here by saying I couldn't agree with you more. I have a healthy respect for the separation of powers, and I do respect the judicial branch, and I think that they play an important role, just as I feel like the legislative and the executive branch do. But some of these judges who are acting as activists and just they're legislating from the bench. That's not the way that our system was intended to be, and that's what's happening here. A judge moved to halt the deportation of some Venezuelans that we tried to get deported, and I actually signed on to a resolution that would. Articles of impeachment, as a matter of fact, against that judge.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it does seem as if the judges, and doesn't surprise me, they're supporting bureaucracy. And it's a little different at the Supreme Court level because they're appointed for life. Other federal judges are too. But I honestly believe that they do stay pretty independent. Not that they don't change over time, but they're pretty independent in what they do. But I think what's interesting about all this judiciary and all of the federal government stuff is they think that the bureaucracy is more important than the executive. And they have created this monster. And with all due respect to everybody that gets a pension from the federal government, it's like they've created, it's a job. You get a pension and sick days and vacation days and a thrift savings account and all of those kinds of things. And then instead of it being public service, which is what the left wants to call it, it's a job they want to protect.
That's exactly right. And that's what we're trying to unwind now. It took me a long time to understand, Martha, but I'm still struggle with it sometimes. But the more money government spends, the less money you have, and that's important to note because we, as I said earlier, we've got a bloated bureaucracy now. We've got too many people who are dependent on the government. And speaking of our forefathers, as we just were. That's not what they intended for it to be. In fact, just the opposite. They wanted the federal government to be secondary, if you will, to the state governments. And that, you look at what the president is trying to do with the Department of Education. Now, I had a school board member that I spoke to earlier this week yesterday, at the parade in Savannah, and she was telling me, what's going to happen with the Department of Education? And I said, aren't you excited? I said, we're trying to push it back down to the local level and to give you more authority. And she kind of, all of a sudden she perked up and she said, man, that'd be great. I said, well, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think it's obviously any kind of change is concerning. I mean, nobody likes change. But we have put this off. We have kicked this can down the road for at least 25 years. And, I loved President Bush. I still love President Bush. He spent a lot of money. Okay. President Obama did grow the economy 1% a year and actually was the deporter in chief. There are good things you can say about President Obama. He spent too much money. And then first Trump and Biden spent way too much money. So I'm so glad that Trump number 2, Trump 47, has gotten religion on this issue.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the point that you make is that it's not been just Democrats. It's been Democrats and Republicans. We've all spent too much money. Of all the things that the president said in his joint address earlier this month, the one thing that really caught my attention when he says, we need a balanced budget. I thought, wow, this is great. We do need a balanced budget, Mr. President, and thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. Buddy Carter, I appreciate you being with us so much today. There's so much to talk about. If people want to contact you, how can they do that?
We're on the internet. It's at Rep Buddy Carter.
Absolutely. We are going to continue talking about this issue, and good luck to you as you go around the state talking about DOGE.
Thank you very much, Martha.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN. Senator Rick Scott is here with me today. He is the senator from Florida, but he also was the governor of Florida. He also is a made from whole cloth businessman who started at the beginning and built something big. So we appreciate you being with us today, Rick. And I think finally people are starting to listen to us about the size of government.
Well, they better. I mean, we're never going to get inflation under control, and we're never going to get interest rates down if we don't balance the budget. Here's what's interesting. Everybody says, "Oh, these states have to balance their budget." That's a lie. Florida, before I became governor, had not balanced its budget in 20 straight years. They just kept borrowing money was balancing the budget. And here's what happens: if you do what we did in Florida, we balanced the budget every year. I was governor. I paid off a third of state debt. And what happened is the private sector grew exponentially. That's exactly what can happen if you look at what Trump wants to do and what Elon Musk is doing. If we stop the growth of the federal government, what's going to happen? The private sector is going to start growing again. But if you look at what we've grown is not the private sector. We've been growing the government sector, and that's at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. Government is pervasive, and that's why we have the inflation we have, and you can't build anything. There's some rule. There's either your local government's a pain in the butt, or your state government's a pain in the butt, or your federal government's a pain in the butt. So you can't build companies anymore. They make it impossible.
So let me ask you this question, since you were a senator and you were also a governor, because like in the state of Georgia, for example, our budget is $33 billion, something like that. And we get about that much from the federal government, too. And so, I have this concern that even though, and I love Republican governors, don't get me wrong, but I have this concern that they're not as excited about the budget being cut because it means that there might be less money coming down to the states. Is that a real thing or not?
Absolutely. I mean, free money is free. When I became governor in January 2011, the first thing they explained to me is that, okay, so don't complain about federal money because it's free.
Free money. There's no such thing as free money.
No. So I'm a turnaround guy. I built, I'm the luckiest guy around. I started life in public housing. Never knew my dad. I got to build companies. Built the biggest hospital company. When I was 40, one of every 400 people in America had a job worked at my company. So here's what I just did turnaround. I did manufacturing companies, healthcare, all sorts of stuff. So I go to the agencies. Here's how I went to agencies to find stuff out. You wouldn't believe this. So I probably 2 or 3 weeks in, I became governor during the financial crisis. I go to the agency that does unemployment. I said, how's it working? They said, Governor, we're open 6 days a week because unemployed Floridians don't have enough time to apply for unemployment during the week. What?
What?
So I said, let me ask you a question. I said, if you go on unemployment, you have to do anything. And they said, oh yeah, you have to apply for 5 jobs a week. I said, how that's going? Well, we don't enforce it. There's not that many jobs. I said, let me ask you a question. If you got on unemployment and you found a job and you knew people were taking the money, would you go after them to get the money back? Because that's fraud, right? Well, no. So I said, oh, here's the deal. We're going to enforce the law. We're going to help people get jobs. So when I became governor, I think there was about 1 million people out of 19 million people in Florida that were on unemployment. 8 years later, we probably had around 22 million people in the state. We had 61,000 people on unemployment. How did we do it? We got people a job, and we demanded that you could be on unemployment, but you had to apply for 5 jobs a week. Guess what? We have governors that never want to enforce that. We said today you can be on Medicaid and there's no work requirement. You can get food stamp. There's no work requirement. You can live in public housing. There's no work requirement. So you can just sit on your butt. We've got over 50 million people in this country, working age, all right, that are not working, all right. But we got think of how many people we have, how many people on food stamps and Medicaid and unemployment and you name the program, and they don't want to work. If I told my mom growing up that I just want to be on the government dole, I would have gotten a whipping. She said, she'd be mad at me. She would have been mad at me my whole life if I ever did that.
No, my parents were the same way. Now, Rick, when these recommendations come from DOGE, I'm sure they're going to come in a package to the House and the Senate. Do you know what that process is going to look like yet?
So here's what's going to happen. Number one, we kept government running, right? So we didn't have to shut down. And the next thing is we've got to do a reconciliation. Now, what reconciliation will allow us to do is these things. Number one, give Trump the money to be able to fix the border. Number two, and deport the criminals and terrorists and those people. That's simple. Number two is plus up our defense so Pete Hegseth has the money to make sure we can defend ourselves. Now, after that, we have the opportunity to get our spending in line. So we've had a $2 trillion annual, that's where we're spending $2 trillion more at the federal government level than we did pre-COVID. That doesn't make any sense. So that's $2 trillion a year. So we've got to reduce that. The other thing is Trump has the ability to send stuff that Elon Musk and the agencies find down to us in a rescission package. Reconciliation only takes 218 Republicans in the House, 51 senators in the Senate, and the president. Rescission, the same thing. So he can find stuff that was in the Biden budget and say, Elon Musk just found this, agencies agree, we shouldn't spend that money. He can send it to us, and we can vote to get rid of it. So that's the next thing that's going to happen. Trump's committed. He said he's committed to a balanced budget. I know the Elon Musk is doing an unbelievable job. We all should be thanking Elon Musk every day. Here's what he's doing. He's doing a little bit different than I did. When I became governor of Florida in January 2011, I went through all 4,000 lines of the budget. And I said, we're going to have a written purpose for every line, and we will balance the budget. At that year, we thought we'd have $70 billion of revenues. I said, we're not going to spend more than $70 billion, and we're not taking any new federal money, right? We're not taking any new federal money unless we approve it. Agencies were just taking it on their own, and it'd be like a 3 or 4 year program. And then at the end, they say, well, everybody's used to this. We got to keep spending money like this. So I stopped all that. Our states have to do the exact same thing. So Musk is finding these things. Agencies are signing off on it. We got to do the rescission.
So one quick answer, because we only have about 30 seconds left. Where does extending the tax cuts fit into this?
It'll be part of reconciliation.
Part of reconciliation.
We'll do the border, we'll do the military, and the tax cuts.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.